quote, man-made global warming, end quote, has been pushed hard for decades after so-called global cooling fizzled out in the 1980s. But the man-made global warming idea has come under major scrutiny lately. Few are aware that it was based on an outdated and flawed computer model called the hockey stick graph. Other defects have also been found in the idea as well. In fact, most global warming advocates have changed the term to climate change because there has been just a tiny amount of change in the average temperature of the Earth in the last 4 or 5 decades. Plus, record low temperatures have been reported periodically in various places on the globe. But in truth, of course, the climate has always changed. It has been much colder in the past, and it has been much warmer. There has been more CO2 in the atmosphere in the past, and there has been less. In fact, carbon dioxide is now deemed the culprit of climate change. It is often considered to be poison by many. But CO2 is what makes it possible for plants to grow. It is the essence of life for them, as well as us, because it is what plants breathe. Few realize that over the last few decades, plant life on the surface of the Earth has increased by an incredible 40%. And those plants, in return, produce the oxygen that animals and all humans need. In other words, an increase in carbon dioxide seems to produce more oxygen than there would be otherwise. I remember that just a few years ago, carbon monoxide was listed with carbon dioxide as greenhouse gas, which was also considered a serious problem for global warming. And humans were blamed for that as well, until scientists realized that trees produce many times the carbon monoxide of humans. The mention of the dangers of carbon monoxide seems to have vanished from the global warming climate change debate. Reading of temperatures to average global temperatures are now reported to oversample urban areas, where the thermometers are often placed near asphalt, and that includes highways, AC units, and other concrete jungle hotspots. This often makes a considerable difference in temperature readings compared to rural readings just a few miles away. Urban areas are only about 3% of the entire area of the United States, but they have approximately 70% of the stations where the readings are affected by urban conditions. And the rural temperature reading stations have seemed to be disproportionately eliminated compared to elimination of urban stations. These kinds of practices are not limited to the U.S. It seems to be common throughout the globe. Climate change is blamed for an increase in storms lately. Most people are unaware that storms in the past have been much greater than they are today, and also less at different periods. The damage from a storm is often greater today because more people have moved south where it is warmer. So there are more houses, property, etc. per square mile to be damaged than in the past. And there's more population per square mile that may be injured or killed by these storms. No one denies the fact that climate is changing and has always changed. But why are thousands of climate change advocates such as Barack Obama buying beach houses if they are expecting the sea levels to rise significantly, which man-made climate change promoters seem to believe? Generally, actions show a person's true beliefs much more than their words. Numerous scientists have disputed the man-made global warming ideas for decades now. The evidence has been overwhelming that any increase or decrease in temperature has been extremely insignificant, at least in the last few decades. So why is the climate change idea pushed so hard? Because it adds fear and gives more control to the politicians that are in the power to advocate it. Because of the fear caused by this belief, hundreds of billions of dollars are allocated to combat it. So we see that when politics get involved, science will often take a back seat. We have seen this in other areas as well. A few of us are aware that the U.S. government, the CDC, etc., severely restricted the distribution of medicines such as ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and monoclonal antibodies for treatment of COVID-19. Hundreds of doctors had tremendous results with them. These medicines reportedly saved millions of lives in the U.S. alone. Yet, apparently, the U.S. government restricted the distribution of these substances to the majority of the doctors in our nation, costing reportedly tens of thousands of lives in the U.S. They simply made it impossible in many places for doctors and pharmacies to obtain them. And these are some of the safest medicines in the entire world. And this restriction on these medicines was supposedly all based on science. And now, after tens of thousands of deaths due to the lack of these medicines, the government agencies seem to be apologizing, kind of, and changing some of their stances on the shots, the medicines, etc. And then we have seen, apparently, millions worldwide that have died or have permanent serious health problems after taking the so-called vaccine for COVID. Chris Cuomo is one example. Just because the government of many nations did not require vetting of the so-called vaccines before they were released. And what is worse, these deadly results began from the very launch of the distribution of these so-called vaccines. Yet the U.S. government never stopped them and insisted on U.S. citizens to take them. They continued to push them as well as the boosters later on, even after tens of thousands of permanent injuries and deaths from these shots. It is now estimated that these so-called vaccines have caused more deaths and permanent serious injuries than COVID itself. Expert doctors, such as one of the inventors of the mRNA vaccine, Robert Malone, warned over and over of the serious dangers of these shots. It fell mostly on deaf ears of government officials and the media. In fact, he, that is Dr. Malone, and others like him, were canceled and censored by the government, the mainstream media, and the tech giants such as Twitter and Facebook, etc. And now we know that such requirements as masking, giving shots to youth, keeping students from school, etc., were unscientific and much more harmful than we were told, and even deadly in many cases. So why am I spending so much time on these subjects? Because it is essential to know that science is not always science. Sometimes science is completely ignored or even changed in order to get a certain idea pushed through. We see this over and over, and these were just two examples. We have seen the major stories in politics that the mainstream media never covered fairly or at all. Millions of people that get their information solely from the mainstream media still believe so-called facts that have been disproved long ago. We now begin to see that the government, big tech, media, etc., is not always out to help or even be honest. They have what is often called the bully pulpit. Their influence can dictate what is heard by the general public and what is not. This is certainly true when it comes to the theory of evolution. But the support by the media, educators, and government for this theory has been going on for many decades, almost 100 years now. Now many of us are understanding the dangers of just believing the so-called science, and realizing the fact that science is not always really science.